Today I will be presenting my lecture recital. It's called Beginning Teaching and the End Result, the Evolution of Suzuki Book 1 Skills through the Violin Repertoire. And I thought we would start off my presentation today just listening to some beautiful music. How about that? This will take about 2 minutes, so enjoy. This is Chloe Chua. She was a finalist in the menuing competition a couple of years back. So that was gorgeous. Like I said, she's one of my new favorite violinists, despite her really young age. I love her playing because it's just beautiful, right? I mean, it's gorgeous. I love the sound quality. I love her poise, just the way she carries herself when she's on stage. I loved her setup, the way she held the instrument, the way she articulated with the bow. It's just, I mean, she's like a true artist. I'm sure we can all agree. And I thought her musicianship was especially mature considering her young age. Of course, I'm a Suzuki teacher, so as a Suzuki teacher, we're supposed to give like specific compliments, not just general compliments. So I came up with a list of very specific reasons why I loved all of the kind of elementary things that I mentioned. So the first specific reason, I thought she had tremendous confidence when she played, just like I said, with the poise that she had when she was being musical. It was pretty impressive. She had great posture, her feet planted firmly on the floor, nice erect head and everything. Her straight bow, this is a Suzuki pre-twinkle skill, but it was always parallel to the bridge, making a great sound quality. The full use of the bow, real tip all the way to the real frog. She had the alternating bows skill down, and she had really advanced bow articulation, especially on that last note, when she was cueing the orchestra. Really impressive. Consistent vibrato. Smooth, accurate shifting. Smooth string crossings, like we all talked about and noticed. She had a gorgeous tone. And mature musicianship. So when I think of Chloe Chua's performance, I can't help but think of Shinichi Suzuki and his philosophy that every child can play like this. I mean, really think about that. According to Shinichi Suzuki, every single child with working appendages and a working brain is capable of playing like that. I mean, that's kind of mind-blowing. Because we know that not all violin students play like this. But they are able to, provided they have the right environment. So I was thinking of the philosophy, every child can, but what needs to be in place? What needs to be in place for a student to reach the level of Chloe Chua? And there are many elements that can add up to performance like this by a student like that. The first thing that can be done is to create a vision for both the parent and child. Because after all, if they don't have a vision, then they don't know what they can aspire to become. They don't know what the level really is like out there. I mean, this is really the highest possible level they can reach. So that's what we want to aspire to. And our students and both as parents. So this can really help parents see the journey from the little tiny beginning skills to the advanced mature player. So the parent's vision comes first because they're in charge. And this can be done with them observing high-level student recitals and observing student lessons at both the beginning and advanced levels. And then the child's vision comes second. And this can be done from them observing advanced students in group class and listening to the Suzuki CD, because we all know that music is just like a language, according to Suzuki. And in order to become fluent in that language, you need to become immersed in it and listen to it continuously all the time, just as you do your native language. So all the Suzuki teachers here will recognize this. This is another element that is paramount in creating a beautiful violinist. This is the Suzuki triangle. As you can see, this triangle is an equilateral one, which means every single corner is of equal importance. The teacher, the parent, and the child. And this triangle is fundamental in creating a beautiful violinist. So in Suzuki lessons, each of these three components are equally important. And at different stages of the student's learning process, the person at the top of the triangle changes. So we're going to talk first about the teacher corner of the triangle. So during lessons, the teacher is at the top of the triangle. And probably in the beginning stages, the teacher is maybe the most important corner at the beginning stages. So the teacher's job is to introduce new ideas, demonstrate new preview spots, and correct and improve the student's playing overall. So, how do we as teachers get all this knowledge that we have into a tiny little child? What's the process of transferring that to a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, you know? And that is where teaching points come in. Little tiny students should probably have no more than one teaching point per lesson, because they probably can't handle more than that. And a teaching point simply focuses on introducing and improving one skill at a time. That's all it means. So if necessary, it's important as the teacher to break the skill down into smaller pieces to allow for easier learning. So if they're working on a particular skill and they can't get it, it's in the student's best interest if you take that skill and break it down into an even smaller part of it to become easier for the student to learn. And the skill will then change to become the smaller piece of the previous skill, an easier, smaller piece. And the teaching point should result in the student performing the skill perfectly. So if they haven't performed it perfectly in the lesson, then I wouldn't consider that being a successful lesson. Because whatever size the teaching point is, they need to be able to do it in order to practice it. And once the skill is learned, the teacher's job is to teach the parent and student how to practice the skill at home. Oh, I had a typo. Sorry. Parents should model the practice at home after the practice of the skill in the lesson. Okay, so the student has performed the skill correctly at least one time in the lesson in front of me. They can do it perfectly. Who ultimately decides whether or not the student has performed the skill correctly? The teacher, the parent, or the student? The answer is the student. Okay, so these are methods for enabling the student self-assessment. And again, even if the child is 3 or 4 or 5, they themselves have to be assessing whether or not they did it correctly. So how will the student know if they have performed the skill correctly? And these are methods. You can ask the student what they're trying to accomplish in the skill. Instead of telling a student, you always have to ask them for their own opinion of how they think it went. And the answer can be surprising. Sometimes it becomes obvious the student had no idea what the skill should entail, so it's important to ask. You can also do role play. You can switch, let the student be the teacher and let the teacher be the student. So the teacher will perform a skill for the student, letting the student point out what can be improved upon in the teacher's repetition of the skill. And it's also important to ask leading questions to the student. So you give the student a choice as to which version of a skill they like better, and ask if the student's repetition of the skill is correct. So for example, if I'm going to ask a student a question, I wouldn't say, do you like that, or do you think it's good? I'm going to say, was your bow too close to the fingerboard, or was it too close to the bridge? And then they have to give a specific answer to my specific question. So now the student is able to point out if they've done the skill correctly, they can do it perfectly, and they've self-assessed. How do you as a teacher get them to practice it? So the practice of a teaching point should only occur after the skill has been performed at least once correctly, and this is really important because if they don't practice it correctly, then what they're doing is they're practicing it incorrectly, and they're just going to keep getting fantastic at playing it wrong, and then it becomes a bad habit, and then you have to fix it at the next lesson. So just stop all that and make sure that they only start practicing it after they can do it once correctly, having self-assessed. How many repetitions are necessary now to master a skill? They can do it once perfectly, but it's not necessarily easy. How many times do you think that they should do it correctly, self-assessing, in order for them to master it? Any ideas? As many as are necessary for the skill to become easy, and up to 10,000 times. However, it will depend on the skill, and it depends on the student, so it won't necessarily take that many times. The more difficult the skill, the longer or the more repetitions it takes for the skill to become easy. Now, practicing the repetitions, because I just said they have to do it a lot. So how do you do that? How do you get a child to do that? How do you get a child to agree to this? And it's not easy, but here are some ideas. So my job as a teacher is to hold the students' focus and concentration as they repeat the same skill over and over again, and assessing themselves each time. And we think it's kind of mind-blowing that they have to do this, but they do it. Chloe Chua did it. We all can do it. Every child can do this. So this can be achieved through games, cards, Mr. Potato Head, dice, Candyland, etc. I mean, there's really no limit to the imagination you can use to make a child do something hundreds or thousands of times correctly. You can do with contests, etc. Sometimes I just come up with new games like on the fly, or